Chapter 1 Moscow in May. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Moscow in early May still feels like winter's hanging on, with a cold wind that sends shivers down your spine. Lin Jie, a Chinese military enthusiast and die-hard Soviet fan, had a clear mission for his Moscow trip, to witness the Grand Military Parade on May 9, commemorating Victory Day in the Great Patriotic War. Not wanting to miss a single detail, Lin Jie was up at 4 in the morning. After packing, he joined the pre-dawn line in Red Square, eager to snag the best spot for photos he could show off back home. He was ready to revel in his moment of bragging rights. The familiar strains of the Red Army is the strongest, a song that always evoked longing for past glories, filled the air as the armored column, the parade's main event, began to roll. Black exhaust billowed from the vehicles as they lumbered toward the viewing platform. Holy crap! A T34-85. A real, moving T34-85. Those guys back home are gonna be so jealous. AT-72B3. Awesome. Gotta get a shot of that turtle shell turret, the classic Soviet look. Here they come. 2 S-35 self-propelled howitzer and 2 S-19. Beautiful. Rozov Vlakovich Lavrenenko, an authentic Russian and descendant of a Red Army soldier, had helped Lin Jie get the parade tickets. He watched Lin Jie snapping photos with a puzzled expression. Lin, China's military is pretty impressive these days. Why come all the way back here to watch the Victory Day parade, 2 years after graduating from Moscow University? Lin Jie lowered his camera, flashed a wide grin, and said, "Come on, Rozov. The fight against fascism was a shared victory, right? Can't I share in the celebration, Tovarish?" Ha! When it comes to smooth talking, no one beats you Chinese. Rozov's hearty laughter diffused the situation. Before he could say more, Lin Jie, glued to his camera, suddenly hissed, "Damn, here it is. The T14 Armata and the Kurganets, 25 infantry fighting vehicle. Why is this stupid camera acting up now?" Regardless of how satisfied Lin Jie felt with his day, the hectic parade day drew to a close with the setting sun. Back in his hotel room, he carefully opened a small box borrowed from Rozov, revealing a treasured artifact, a genuine hero of the Soviet Union medal, the holy grail for Soviet fanatics. This wasn't a cheap imitation. It was the real deal, awarded posthumously to Rozov's great-grandfather, Dmitry Fedorovich Lavrenenko, the Soviet Union's top tank ace, on May 5, 1990. Lavrenenko had destroyed 52 German tanks during the war. It was remarkable that this legendary medal, the ultimate symbol of Soviet military honor, had survived to the present day. The year after the medal was awarded, the Soviet Union, once a superpower rivaling the United States and NATO, crumbled under its own internal contradictions. The collapse plunged its citizens into poverty and disillusionment. In that bleak era, Rozov's father, desperate to feed his family, had considered selling the medal, a symbol of his ancestors' glory, for bread and food, but after a fierce internal battle, he chose to keep it, and somehow guided his family through those terrible years. Now, this hero of the Soviet Union medal, awarded just before the Soviet Union's demise, was Rozov's most prized possession. Even Lin Jie, who had only been a drinking buddy in college, had managed to persuade Rozov to let him borrow the medal for a closer look. Weighing the solid gold medal in his hand, Lin Jie could almost picture Lavrenenko on the Eastern Front, fearlessly leading his T-34 into battle against German tanks. Moved by the historical significance of the medal, Lin Jie carefully returned it to its box and placed it in the bedside cabinet. Better give this back to Rozov tomorrow. Not even an earthquake could wake him up right now. Like many Russian men, Rozov was a vodka enthusiast. He had an almost unhealthy obsession with the stuff, and after a couple of bottles, he'd invariably pass out. The only way to rouse him from his stupor was a bucket of ice water. Listening to Rozov's loud snores from the next room, Lin Jie drifted off to sleep, exhausted from the day. Little did he know that a life-altering event was about to unfold. Chapter 2 Fierce Battle. Barbarossa. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lieutenant Malyshenko, wake up. Wake up. Comrade Lieutenant, German tanks. What do we do? Huh. Someone's yelling in his room. In Russian. Half asleep, Lin Jie heard two loud Slavic voices. He snapped awake, realizing something was wrong. Scumbag. You dare break into my room to steal? I'll break your legs. That the shout died in his throat. The scene in front of him was bizarre and chilling. A faded black and white photo of some girl was taped to the cold steel wall. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with diesel filled the air. It was overwhelming, making Lin Jie want to cough. He was totally disoriented. Wasn't I in a hotel room? Chasing tail for fun. What the hell is this place? Shocked, he looked around, instinctively reaching up to pinch himself. But what his left hand touched sent a jolt of terror through him. Holy crap. A dead body? What the hell? He stared at the dark, sticky blood on his wrist. A headless corpse, still warm and bleeding, sat slumped against the wall next to him. He recognized the uniform on the corpse. Even in the dim light, Lin Jie could see it was a standard Soviet armored uniform from World War II. The driver and mechanic, down in the chassis, were getting frantic because the only surviving officer wasn't responding. Comrade Lieutenant. What now? The German tanks are less than 500 meters. Germans. Tanks. Hearing the urgent shouts from below and seeing the headless corpse in the Soviet uniform, he looked around the cramped space. It was hard to even turn around. A terrible realization dawned on Lin Jie. Hold on, I need to see what's going on first. He answered the crew with a shaky voice, still trying to deny the awful truth. He clambered out of his seat and struggled to open the heavy hatch above him. He stuck his upper body out of the tank, whoosh. Boom, crack. The putrid smell of burning battlefield mixed with the whine of shells and explosions hit him full force. He saw the iron-gray tanks advancing in the distance. He looked down at the tall, angular turret below him. Despite his resistance, the brutal reality was unavoidable. He traveled through time, and he was on the Eastern Front, the most brutal and deadly theater of World War II. Clutching his tank helmet, he slumped back into his loader's seat, feeling numb. His quick look outside had confirmed the war zone and also the type of tank he was in, a T-34/76 model 1941. Lost in thought, he was snapped back to reality when an armor-piercing shell screamed from a German tank that had paused to take aim. Clang. The T-34/76 shuddered from the impact. The deafening clang reverberated through the tank, rattling the crew. A 75mm shell fired from a German Panzer IV-C, 500 meters away, had failed to penetrate the upper armor. The weakness of the early Panzer IV short-barreled gun against armored units was clear. He was still trying to process his time travel predicament, but the near miss was a wake-up call. It's a battlefield. Kill or be killed. If they want to mess with me, I'll kill them first. Driven by the ultimate rule of survival, Lin Jie, with unexpected skill, grabbed the headless corpse and dragged it out of the gunner's seat. He squeezed into the gunner's position, reached down, grabbed a 76mm shell from the rack below, and returned to the blood-splattered position. He set the shell aside for a moment and opened the breech. A spent shell, still hot, ejected into the collection box. He grabbed the 76mm shell, shoved it into the gun, and closed the breech. He put his face to the gunner's sight and started adjusting the elevation and direction, quickly lining up the target he'd already locked onto. Chapter 3 Brave Heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As a top-of-the-line tank that outclassed German armor in the early days of the war, the 1941 T-34-76 in Lin Jie's hands boasted an F-34 76.2mm gun. This gave him a serious edge in firepower and armor penetration compared to the German tanks rolling his way. He quickly eyeballed the distance to the target using the gun sight. As the gunner, commander, and loader all rolled into one, he was run ragged. How Lin Jie had somehow picked up these tank skills was beyond him. Focused on surviving, Lin Jie aimed the gun and, acting purely on instinct, slammed his foot down on the firing pedal. The BR-350B 76mm armor-piercing shell, already loaded, ignited with a bang. Flying at 655 meters per second, it shot straight toward a German Panzer IV-C, a bullet aimed right at the bullseye. It was both expected and shocking. The Panzer IV-C, sitting still at just over 500 meters while returning fire, couldn't dodge. Lin Jie's shot slammed into the front armor. The early Panzer IV-C's 30mm rolled steel armor was no match for the T-34-76. Able to punch through 85mm of vertical steel at 500 meters, the BR-350B made mincemeat of the Panzer IV's flimsy protection. The Germans' outdated vertical armor design gave the T-34-76 a perfect opportunity to show its stuff. It cut through like a hot knife through butter. Lin Jie's 76mm round ripped a fist-sized hole in the front of the Panzer IV before exploding inside. The 108 grams of TNT in the warhead detonated instantly, thanks to the armor-piercing fuse. Boom. Like a champagne bottle shaken and uncorked, the Panzer IV, already reeling from the BR-350B, couldn't take the force. The blast set off the dozens of 75mm shells stowed in the chassis, creating a massive explosion. Flames erupted, reaching for the sky. The 5 German crewmen, caught in the middle of combat, didn't have a chance. They were trapped, screaming, and burned alive amidst the exploding shells and burning fuel. Lin Jie watched the burning German tank, the commander's half-charred body hanging from the turret, a horrifying sight. In 10 seconds, he'd taken 5 lives. But if he hadn't, he'd be the one dead. War isn't about right or wrong, it's about who's left standing in the end. Through their observation ports, the driver and mechanic watched Lin Jie's solo performance in disbelief. A wave of excited shouts erupted from the tank's hull. "Holy crap, Comrade Lieutenant, you got him. Look at those German bastards burning. Ha! The mighty Red Army is invincible. Go home and lick boots, you crispy invaders." Sweating under the pressure, Lin Jie snapped back to reality and barked orders to his crew. "Serioza, get us out of here. Full speed ahead. Nikolai, get up here and help me load. We need to keep hitting these Germans. Move it." "Yes, Comrade Lieutenant, on my way." Nikolai scrambled from his position in the front of the hull, squeezed into the turret, and wrestled the body of Captain Brasovsky, the former commander and gunner, into the hull. This was no easy feat for the burly Slav. The T-34's sloped armor gave it great protection but left little room inside. Nikolai struggled to follow Lin Jie's orders. Sweating and straining, Nikolai reached the loader's station and grabbed a shell. He began loading the gun with clumsy, unfamiliar movements. 2 o'clock, about 350 meters, armor-piercing ready. Armor-piercing loaded, with the help of the turret's electric motor, plus some manual cranking, the gunner's wide-angle periscope gave a pretty good view as he spun the turret and lined up the next target. Lin Jie, now completely absorbed in the battle, peered back into the gun sight and made his final adjustments. A quick visual range check, and he locked onto the target. Without hesitation, Lin Jie slammed his foot on the firing pedal. Another armor-piercing shell was loaded and fired. As another Panzer III exploded, its surviving crew scrambling to escape, a shout echoed from behind Lin Jie's tank, reaching everyone inside. "For Mother Russia, destroy these German devils. Davrich, Ola." Chapter 4 Assault on Oreka. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As the rousing slogan blared from outside, the sound of countless footsteps, like a stampede of horses, mixed with the fervent battle cries and the tank engine's roar, echoing in Lin Jie's ears. Lin Jie snapped out of his shock first, realizing the battlefield situation had drastically changed. He immediately threw open the turret hatch and leaned out. He saw countless Red Army soldiers, their morale sky-high, clutching Mosin-Nagant rifles and DP light machine guns, charging towards the enemy alongside BT-series fast tanks and early Soviet models like the T-26. They were launching a fierce attack on the Germans. Contrary to the anti-Soviet propaganda spread by Western countries later, Lin Jie saw plenty of Soviet army political commissars, pistols in hand, leading their troops in a counterattack against the German invaders. These young commissars might have been dogmatic and had their share of unpopular quirks, but most of these young officers, crucial to Red Army morale and political education, undoubtedly had the courage to back up their positions and beliefs. Like the straw that broke the camel's back, the already depleted German tank force, caught off guard during repairs, couldn't withstand a massive Soviet counterattack. The remaining German tanks stopped their advance, shifted into reverse, and began to retreat, dragging the already chaotic German infantry with them. The principle of striking when the iron is hot wasn't just a Chinese proverb. The Soviets, eager to capitalize on their victory, lived by it. Hold the line. Hold the line. We can't let the Soviets overrun us. Push them back. That the German commander was referring to a small Soviet village near Oreka. It was the initial foothold captured by the German Wehrmacht's 13th Armored Division and was being used for temporary repairs. After a brutal attack earlier, this detachment of the 13th Armored Division had been caught napping by the leading elements of the Soviet 20th Tank Division's dawn counterattack. Although the German commander reacted quickly, ordering an armored assault against the Soviet troops, they managed to destroy over a dozen T-26, BT-5, and BT-7 light tanks. Not a bad score, but the T-34 tank, resembling a Soviet command vehicle, stood like a rock in the sea, impervious to the German anti-tank fire. Neither the short-barreled 75mm guns of the most advanced German Type 4C tank nor the PAK-36 37mm anti-tank gun, the weapon the Germans had always relied on during their blitzkrieg offensives, could make a dent. These weapons, previously invincible in the early European blitzkriegs, were useless against the Soviet T-34's sloped armor, and then it got worse. Just as the Germans deployed their anti-tank weapons and concentrated fire, seemingly causing some internal damage to the troublesome T-34, bringing it to a halt, before the overjoyed German commander could celebrate and move in to finish off this powerful enemy tank, the T-34, which the Germans thought was done for, resurrected, its turret swinging around, its black gun barrel aimed directly at the advancing German troops. Seeing this nearly captured Soviet tank rejoin the fight with the arrival of Soviet reinforcements, and with the BT series light tanks completing a flanking maneuver, the German commander had no choice but to order his remaining troops back to the village to dig in. Lin Jie, hanging out of the turret, watched as the friendly tanks and infantry thundered past, launching a fierce assault on the Germans retreating towards the village. He sighed with relief, knowing he'd been saved, and he knew exactly what he had to do. He pulled himself back into the turret, closing the heavy hatch. Without hesitation, he gave the order to the driver, Serioza. Serioza, let's go. Let's tear those crispy krauts a new one. Yes, comrade lieutenant. That the four-stroke V-type 12-cylinder water-cooled diesel engine roared to life in the rear engine compartment as Serioza sprang into action. The powerful diesel engine, rated at 500 horsepower, propelled the 28-ton T-34/76 medium tank straight towards the German defenses at a cross-country speed of over 30 km per hour. The bright green 92mm tracer machine gun barrage, along with 75mm armor-piercing rounds, unleashed maximum firepower on the advancing Soviet infantry and tanks. The brutal, white-hot battle caught the Germans, who had just retreated to the village unprepared to reorganize their troops and establish defenses against the rapid Soviet advance. 1 o'clock, Soviets coming. Fire. Fire. Ammo. I'm out. I need a loader. Where's the loader? Left, right. 12 o'clock. Ah, the Soviets are everywhere. Tanks, repel the tanks. Damn it, this pea shooter doesn't do squat to Ivan's tanks. Who invented this garbage? While the German 13th Armored Division had the advantage of prepared defenses in the village's bunkers and trenches, the Soviet counterattack, with its overwhelming strength and high morale, was unstoppable. The German MG-34 machine gun teams were crushed under the tracks of the rolling Soviet BT-7 fast tanks, turning men and guns into a mangled mess. Like trapped animals, the remaining Germans fought to the death. Lin Jie's T-34 picked off the Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks one by one, turning them into burning steel tombs. That evening, Major General Rokossovsky's Soviet 9th Mechanized Corps finally achieved its objective after a day of intense fighting. With its superior strength, combining the main forces of the 35th Tank Division and the leading elements of the 20th Tank Division, the 9th Mechanized Corps severely mauled the German Wehrmacht's elite 13th Panzer Division entrenched in the southwest corner of the Kleven area near Oreka, marking the Soviet Army's first tactical victory since Germany launched Operation Barbarossa. Chapter 5: The Arrival of the Political Commissar. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The quiet, cold moonlight bathed the war-torn landscape. In a small village, recently the site of a brutal clash between Soviet and German forces, Lin Jie, still dazed from the fighting, sat beside his parked T-34 tank, listlessly poking at his lunch. A mixture of peas and some kind of watery vegetable sauce clung to his spoon. Lin Jie wouldn't have called it gourmet, but driving a tank through the chaos of war was exhausting. He was tired and hungry after a long day, and the hot food was hard to resist, so he ate it in large bites. Before he could finish, a figure trotted up to him, unnoticed in his focus on eating. "Which one of you is the commander of Tank 177? Important mission." Lin Jie looked up at the sudden interruption. The man's identity startled Saryosha, the driver, and Nikolai, the electromechanical technician, who were also wolfing down their food nearby. Clattering and banging filled the air as metal lunchboxes and utensils were dropped in haste. Saryosha and Nikolai scrambled to their feet from their cross-legged positions, looking flustered. "Good evening, Commissar Petrov." "Comrade Political Commissar," Nikolai, mechanical and electrical engineer of Tank 177, reporting for duty. "Good health to you." The two men's panic annoyed Lieutenant Colonel Petrov, the division political commissar of the 20th Tank Division. What might have been normal behavior on any other day now grated on his nerves. "You two idiots. I'll ask again, where's your commander? Tell him to get over here." "Comrade Political Commissar, no need to look, I'm right here." Lin Jie set down his half-empty lunchbox and stood up, interrupting Lieutenant Colonel Petrov. Straightening his posture, Lin Jie gave a crisp salute. "Captain Brasovsky, the original commander and gunner of Tank 177, is dead. Lieutenant Malyshenko, the loader, is serving as the temporary commander. Awaiting your orders, Comrade Political Commissar." Lieutenant Colonel Petrov, seemingly swayed by the rumors he'd heard, slowly nodded, observing the resolute young man before him. "Very well, Lieutenant Malyshenko. I have some questions. Why was your original commander, Captain Brasovsky, killed in action? Here it comes asterisk, Lin Jie thought, sighing inwardly but outwardly remaining calm. He knew that in the 1941 Soviet Army, a lower-level officer had to be incredibly careful when speaking to political commissars. Maintaining his composure, he gestured towards the tank. "Comrade Political Commissar, some things are best explained up close. Please, follow me." Despite his suspicion, Petrov followed Lin Jie to the front of the T-34, its scarred surface reflecting the pale moonlight. The armor was riddled with impacts. During the day's brutal battle, the front armor of Lin Jie's T-34, along with most of the turret's front, had withstood dozens of German rounds ranging from 37 mm to 75 mm. Though the sloped armor had deflected many of these armor-piercing rounds, they'd left shallow, crater-like dents all over the surface. Like the surface of the moon, the sight seemed to bring the day's brutal fighting back to life for Lieutenant Colonel Petrov, and he nodded slowly as he gazed at the battle-worn tank. "It appears you and your crew faced heavy combat today, Lieutenant Malyshenko. Your loyalty and courage are commendable. I will be sure to report this to Colonel Cherniev later." Colonel Cherniev was the acting division commander of the 20th Tank Division, when Major General Rokossovsky received the order to lead the 9th Mechanized Army to meet the German forces. Kadykov, the commander of the 20th Tank Division, was hospitalized and unable to fulfill his duties. The deputy division commander, Colonel Cherniev, temporarily took over command, leading the troops alongside the 9th Mechanized Army. In essence, the 20th Tank Division, Lin Jie's unit, was under the temporary leadership of Colonel Cherniev. "Thank you, Comrade Political Commissar, but there's something more important I need to explain." Lin Jie brushed aside the accolades, eager to explain the real situation. "Please look here, Comrade Political Commissar." Captain Brasovsky was in the gunner's position on the right side of the turret. That spot took at least 20 armor-piercing hits from the Germans. The concentrated fire caused severe armor fatigue. Eventually, the frontal armor on the right side of the turret couldn't withstand the kinetic impact. It collapsed inward, and the resulting shrapnel flew through the turret. One piece hit Comrade Brasovsky's neck, killing him. I narrowly escaped because I was on the left side near the loader. Following Lin Jie's gesture, Petrov saw the obvious cracks in the armor near the gun mantlet on the turret's right side. Knowing the T-34's construction well, the lieutenant colonel had already accepted Lin Jie's explanation. To simplify manufacturing and reduce costs, the Soviets had opted for an integral cast turret on the T-34, unlike the Germans' welded and cut armor. Chapter 6: The Sorrow of T-34. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Compared to the cut and welded armor on German tanks, the T-34's cast turret had clear advantages. This one-piece construction streamlined the turret manufacturing process and cut down on production time. It also eliminated material waste from cutting and welding, along with the hassle of remelting scrap. All this drove down production costs, paving the way for the T-34's mass production and the steel torrent tactics. However, Soviet tank technology lagged behind Germany's, and the cast turret design had its own flaws. The casting process often left impurities, dirt, and bubbles trapped in the T-34's turret armor, which weakened its overall quality. Early in the war, this wasn't a huge problem because the Germans were using short-barreled guns and ineffective armor-piercing rounds like the 37 Knocker. But then came the German 88mm Flak 36-37 anti-aircraft gun, a game-changer. Its PZGR, capped armor-piercing shells could punch through 125mm of vertical armor at 500 meters. This was a disaster for the 1941 T-34/76, which only had a 90mm gun mantlet and 45mm of armor on the sides of its turret. The T-34's flawed cast turret armor, riddled with impurities and bubbles, couldn't withstand the German 88's superior penetration. These 88mm guns often punched right through, making the turret's supposed armor thickness meaningless. Luckily, during today's surprise attack, the German troops caught off guard while repairing their vehicles hadn't deployed their 88s. However, due to its larger, more distinctive profile compared to the BT series fast tanks and T-26 light tanks, tank number 177 became a priority target for German anti-tank fire. The turret of number 177 took a beating. After repeated hits, the front armor on the right side gave way due to the hidden flaws in the cast turret. Captain Brasovsky, the original commander, was killed by the collapsing armor and shrapnel. Lin Jie witnessed this firsthand upon arriving on the battlefield. Lieutenant Colonel Petrov, the political commissar of the 20th Tank Division, knew about the armor quality issues with the T-34's cast turret, but a lieutenant colonel couldn't fix the problem. The strategic decision to simplify manufacturing, reduce costs, and shorten production time, all to create an overwhelming armored force, was Comrade Stalin's approved strategy for the Soviet Army. Lieutenant Colonel Petrov's job as a political commissar was to do his best under these circumstances, serve the country, and maintain troop morale. Strategic issues were above his pay grade. Even so, feeling the weight of his responsibilities and the need to recognize Lin Jie's valor, Lieutenant Colonel Petrov patted Lin Jie on the shoulder and spoke with a hint of warmth. "Tell me, Comrade Malyshenko, how many enemy vehicles did you and your men destroy today?" Lin Jie, surprised by the political commissar's sudden change in tone, paused, then gave a conservative estimate based on his memories. "About 9 enemy tanks and at least 7 anti-tank guns. Mostly Panzer III and 38T light tanks. 2, maybe 3, Panzer IVs. The anti-tank guns were mostly those small 37mm pea shooters. Luckily, the Germans in the village didn't have their 88s. Those big guns aren't ideal for quick deployment in the field." "Ah, very good." Petrov nodded, showing his approval. After a moment, he asked, "Are there any friendly units who can confirm your achievements, Comrade Malyshenko? You know, reporting such impressive results will inevitably raise eyebrows. For your sake, and for the division, it would be best if other units witnessed these kills." Petrov had a point. The Soviet Western Front Army Group had suffered a series of defeats since the start of the German invasion, so claiming such a significant victory required eyewitness testimony to silence skeptics. Lin Jie, expecting this question, had his answer ready. "Yes, Comrade Political Commissar. During the counterattack, tank number 311, a BT-7, and tank number 202, a T-26, supported my tank. They can confirm my account. Petrov was relieved. The Soviet army, reeling from defeats, desperately needed a hero like Lieutenant Malyshenko, properly publicized. His accomplishments could inspire the entire Red Army. Promoting this kind of heroism was part of Lieutenant Colonel Petrov's duties. Petrov decided to discuss the matter with the acting division commander, Colonel Cherniev, and report the results. He turned back to Lin Jie. "Comrade Malyshenko, if you're able, I think you should come with me to division headquarters. Comrade Cherniev will want to meet our division's fighting hero." Chapter 7 Trip to Division Headquarters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although a little surprised by Lieutenant Colonel Petrov's request, after thinking it over, Lin Jie felt he couldn't refuse the divisional political commissar's offer. He smiled and immediately agreed. Petrov nodded slowly. "I'd be honored, Comrade Political Commissar," that he followed Petrov toward the headquarters of the Soviet 20th Tank Division in the village. Lin Jie, still fascinated by this strange, war-torn world, saw Red Army soldiers sitting around in small groups, eating and resting. These young soldiers, about his age, didn't show the high morale and fearless determination he'd read about. War's trauma and the shadow of death were etched on their faces. Every face seemed numb, lifeless, the soul evaporated. The bold courage that flares up in battle gradually fades, leaving behind only a longing for family and a fear of war and death. After absorbing the battlefield scenes, he followed Petrov to the 20th Tank Division headquarters in the village center. Simple wooden poles held up a field tent. Radio antennas surrounded the area, guarded by energetic Red Army soldiers. This was a typical Soviet division-level field headquarters in the summer of 1941. It didn't look like the classic image of Red Army soldiers with PPSH-41 submachine guns. In the summer of 1941, just after the start of Operation Barbarossa, the PPSH-41 was a new model, based on the Finnish Suomi submachine gun. Only a few dozen had been made for testing, an experimental weapon with flaws. The Red Army soldiers guarding the 20th Tank Division headquarters carried the older Mosin-Nagant 1891 30-bolt-action rifles. Lin Jie even spotted several burly soldiers standing guard with DP light machine guns, looking like furry bears. Before Lin Jie could take it all in, Petrov turned to him. "Comrade Malyshenko, I'll let Division Commander Cherniev know you're here. Please wait." Before Lin Jie could respond, Petrov, always efficient, strode forward and opened the tent flap of the division headquarters. "Damn Kraut. Tell me. Where are your division's main forces and headquarters? What are the army group's next plans?" Petrov hadn't even stepped inside when the Slavic shouting reached him. Inside, Colonel Cherniev, acting commander of the 20th Tank Division, was yelling at a German officer with a battered face, tied to a chair. The German major's iron-gray uniform was stained with blood, snot, tears, and dirt. He was covered in stains and unknown bloodstains. Cherniev and two soldiers had been punching and kicking him, knocking out 2 teeth. He mumbled the same words. "I've told you, if I knew more, I'd tell you. Our division's main forces and headquarters are constantly moving. Radio contact has been cut off. How would I know where they are?" that he mumbled through blood bubbles, making his words harsh. The captured, tortured German major could barely speak. "Our division, part of the Southern Army Group, is advancing into the Soviet Union. The first goal is to encircle and capture Kiev. That's what I heard in our division's combat meeting. A little major like me can't know more. Please, believe me and let me go." After hearing the truthful confession again, Colonel Cherniev put down the wooden stick and collapsed into a chair. "Comrade Division Commander, personally interrogating a prisoner like this isn't how senior Red Army officers should act. Your health is important. If you're exhausted, who will lead our division to victory?" Cherniev turned at the sound of the voice behind him. He saw Petrov standing there. "Oh, Petrov, you idiot. How many times have I told you, announce yourself before coming in? You always sneak around like a ghost." Petrov smiled faintly and strode forward. "Ghosts are bourgeois fantasies. Great communist soldiers aren't superstitious. Tell me, Cherniv, what did you get out of this stubborn kraut while I was gone? Cherniv waved his hand, disappointed. He'd gotten nothing. Same old thing. All this kraut says is that the Southern Army Group's main objective is Kiev. Chapter 8 Gunshots in the Dark Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Cherniev heard the complaint, Lieutenant Colonel Petrov, anticipating this outcome, exchanged a knowing smile with him. See? I told you, Comrade Commander. Trying to squeeze anything worthwhile out of some junior officer from the National Defense Forces is a pipe dream. A major wouldn't even know his division's monthly supply quotas, let alone anything truly valuable. Petrov removed his political commissar's hat, gently brushing the Faith and Glory badge as if caressing a lover's face. Am I wrong? Butterbar? He asked calmly. The lieutenant general looked surprised and fearful, turning to Petrov, who remained composed. Commander Yave, the German major dazed from the beating, finally nodded hesitantly. See, Comrade Commander. Even he admits it. This guy's useless. Time to send him where he belongs. Cherniv, his face grim, glanced at Petrov, who shrugged helplessly, then at the half-dead German major standing nearby. Cherniv sighed, then waved his hand dismissively toward the tent door. Fine, take him away and get it over with. Petrov, understanding Cherniev's implied meaning, winked at two heavily armed Red Army soldiers in the tent. You heard him. Send him where he belongs. Yes, Comrade Political Commissar, that they tossed their Mosin-Nagant rifles behind them, their thick arms grabbing the beaten and barely standing German major, and dragged him toward the tent door. The German major, seemingly relieved to escape further torture, felt a flicker of hope at being treated as a prisoner of war. Thanks, he mumbled. The German's voice was barely audible, but as Commissar Petrov passed him, stroking his cap badge, a strange smile crept across his face. As the German major was escorted out, Petrov approached Cherniv, who sat deep in thought. Bang! A gunshot shattered the night. Red Army soldiers throughout the village, startled by the familiar Mosin-Nagant report, grabbed their weapons, ready to deploy. But the veterans, leaning against the walls, remained calm. Relax, rookies. Division headquarters caught a German major. They're just wrapping things up. Don't jump the gun. The German major stumbled forward, collapsing as a 7.62 by 54 mm bullet blew away half his head. The sight was gruesome. Listen to that beautiful music, Comrade Cherniv. The sound of righteous Red Army bullets ending the lives of worthless scum is the sweetest melody. I could listen to it all night. Cherniv, preoccupied, ignored Petrov's overblown praise and shifted to more serious matters. Speaking of which, Peter, what did you find out about car number 177? Is the record of destruction real? Petrov dropped his theatrics and answered seriously. It's true, Comrade Division Commander. The story of car number 177 destroying over a dozen German tanks is confirmed. I interviewed several soldiers. However, Captain Brasovsky, the commander, was killed early in the battle. It was Lieutenant Malyshenko, the loader, who led number 177 to that record. What? Brasovsky's dead? Malyshenko did it? How is that possible? Initially shocked, Cherniv relaxed as he saw Petrov's calm assurance and began to grasp the implications. Well, if you investigated it, I trust it's true. Our Red Army soldiers are fueled by unwavering belief and invincible courage, coupled with our superior tanks. Anything's possible. He stroked his chin, considering the matter. Cherniv, like Petrov, saw the significance. This is extraordinary, Peter. A Red Army soldier, driven by faith, led a skeleton crew to achieve such results in a single day. It's nothing short of a miracle. We need to document this and report it to General Rokossovsky. This is the greatest achievement of our 20th Tank Division since the war began. Petrov, smiling, adjusted his hat and faced Cherniv. I knew you'd see it the same way. I brought our hero with me. Would you like to hear the details firsthand? Chapter 9 The future is dim. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the command tent of the 20th Tank Division, Commander Cherniv, having grilled Lin Jie for what felt like forever, finally seemed satisfied. So, you're telling me you single-handedly took on the roles of commander, gunner, and loader, and led your surviving crew to victory? Facing the commander's question, Lin Jie snapped to attention. Yes, Comrade Division Commander. After Commander Brasovsky died, I took over and kept fighting. Those German tin cans were nothing against our T-34s. Their will is as brittle as their armor. The Red Army's Iron Fist will teach them what real tank warfare is all about. Cherniv and Lieutenant Colonel Petrov exchanged surprised glances at Lin Jie's passionate outburst, then Cherniv smiled slightly. Lieutenant Malyshenko, if every Red Army commander and soldier had your revolutionary optimism and fighting spirit, the Germans wouldn't even dream of crossing the Dnieper. Lin Jie, pursing his lips, finally raised his hand in a crisp salute. Comrade Commander, I firmly believe that our invincible Red Army, under the leadership of Comrade Stalin, will drive those damned invaders and their lackeys out of our motherland. We believe it and are ready to fight to defend her. Despite his confident words, Lin Jie, being a time traveler, knew all too well what was coming in 1941. It wouldn't be long before General Guderian's panzer divisions would use lightning-fast blitzkrieg tactics to smash the Soviet forces, quickly crossing the Dnieper and paving the way for the rest of the German army. Then, Army Group Center, led by Field Marshal Bach, would arrive, cross the Dnieper, and advance towards Moscow, the heart of the Soviet capital. The Soviet army, already at a huge disadvantage in 1941, would have no natural defenses between the German Army Group Center and Moscow. The Red Army faced a brutal battle to defend its capital, thinking about the devastating defeats and millions of losses the Soviets would suffer. Lin Jie felt a pang of guilt, unable to tell his superiors that the Germans were about to cross the Dnieper and threaten Moscow. He worried about his own survival. Damn, I have to find a way to make it through 1941. I can't just end up as another statistic in this nightmare. That while Lin Jie was silently trying to figure out how to survive the year, oblivious to the German army's overwhelming advantage, Cherniv spoke. All right, Comrade Malyshenko. I'm officially promoting you to captain and appointing you as commander of your first tank company, succeeding the late Captain Brasovsky. Furthermore, Commissar Petrov and I are impressed with your record. We'll be sending your battle report to 9th Army Headquarters. I think General Rokossovsky will be pleased to read it. You may even receive a medal, Comrade Malyshenko. Lin Jie, knowing what to say, smiled knowingly. No, Comrade Division Commander. This is an honor for the entire 20th Tank Division. That it was late when Lin Jie left the division headquarters. Looking up at the starlit sky, he sighed and started back toward his tank. Everything since his sudden awakening had confirmed that he was truly on the Eastern Front in 1941. That year, the Germans were unstoppable. After besieging Leningrad and capturing key cities like Kiev, they advanced on Moscow. If it hadn't been for Stalin's foresight and Zhukov's leadership, the Nazi flag might have flown over the Kremlin in 1942. Lin Jie felt another headache coming on. Unbelievable. The Germans captured 600,000 Red Army soldiers at Kiev alone. The number who died in 1941 was over 1 million. How can I, just a captain, hope to survive that? Growing increasingly frustrated, Lin Jie returned to his number 177 T-34, climbed onto the turret, opened the hatch, and jumped inside. Seriosha and Nikolai, sharing a bottle of homemade vodka in a corner of the tank, were startled. They had no idea what was wrong with their commander. They exchanged worried glances, but neither dared to ask. Sitting in the gunner's seat, still smelling of diesel and blood, Lin Jie tried to calm his nerves. In the moonlight filtering through the hatch, he noticed a small black and white photo taped to the bulkhead near the loader's position. Curious, Lin Jie gently removed the photo. By the moonlight, he could make out the image. Well, a pretty girl, and, is that me? Although the first meeting felt strange, another memory, existing in his mind, silently told Lin Jie that the person in the photo was his counterpart in this world, Dmitry Drukovich Malyshenko. Chapter 10. Who am I? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dmitry Drukovich Malyshenko, that's the name everyone knows Lin Jie by now, born July 31, 1916, he was a baby boy in a typical Russian peasant family, farming the same land outside Moscow for generations. At 19, Malyshenko volunteered for the Soviet Red Army, landing a spot at the Ulyanovsk Tank Corps Academy in 1935. There, the young man learned how to drive a tank and, more importantly, how to master its gun, turning it into a precision instrument. He was full of hope for the future. After graduation, the newly commissioned second lieutenant Malyshenko got his first taste of combat during the Soviet invasion of Poland in 1939, commanding his T-26 light tank crew. Malyshenko encountered the German army for the first time, socialist brothers, no less. He watched his unit commander chatting amiably with German generals, even slapping each other on the back like old friends. Unable to speak up, Malyshenko felt something was deeply wrong. These socialist brothers were dividing Poland between them, but someday, wouldn't these armies turn on each other, vying for territory and clashing over irreconcilable ideologies? Later, during the battle where Captain Brasovsky of Tank No. 177 was killed, Lieutenant Malyshenko, the deputy company commander, was forced to abandon his own T-34 due to mechanical failure. He temporarily joined Captain Brasovsky's crew as a loader. What happened next was what Lin Jie remembered upon waking up, drawing on his skills from the Ulyanovsk tank school and his limited war experience from the Polish invasion. Lin Jie, piloting Malyshenko's body, found himself in a life-or-death struggle against German tanks. Somehow, he managed to function as commander, gunner, and loader, simultaneously. Leveraging the T-34's superior firepower, he single-handedly wiped out the opposing German Panzer III and IV tanks, earning his unit the highest kill count of the battle. Yet, sitting in the turret, Lin Jie couldn't shake a nagging doubt, now that he knew his name, who was the beautiful girl in the photo. He rubbed his head, searching Malyshenko's memories. Then, it hit him. Natalia Pokolonskaya, daughter of a former Tsarist nobleman. She survived the revolution because she was a kid and ended up adopted in my village. We grew up together. She's my childhood sweetheart. Malyshenko was speechless. I'm not even sure if I'm going to make it, and I'm dealing with this stuff. That he started to put the photo back on the bulkhead, then hesitated. This was all he had left, so putting it in a place where it could get damaged didn't seem right. After a brief internal debate, he sighed and gave in to his instincts. He tucked the old black and white photo inside his jacket, carefully securing it. The long day of fighting had taken its toll. He yawned and slumped back in his commander's seat, falling asleep instantly. The June sun rose, bathing the landscape in golden light. Dazzled by the sunlight, Malyshenko woke to the sound of his driver, Seriosha. Comrade Malyshenko, we heard you've been promoted to captain and made commander of the 1st Company. Congratulations. Stiff and sore, Malyshenko straightened up. Still half asleep, he grabbed the piece of black leba bread from Seriosha, barely bigger than his fist, and shoved it into his mouth. Promotions during wartime are more like death warrants, Seriosha. Sometimes you get a position not because you're the best, but because everyone else who was suitable is dead. They pick the tallest among the short, that's all. He finished the last of the bread, licking the crumbs from his fingers. One day you might get the same kind of promotion, Seriosha. But remember, don't let it go to your head. Bullets and cannonballs don't care if you're a soldier or a general. We only get one life. Seriosha nodded, clearly absorbing the captain's words. The young driver had a lot to learn. Oh, and sir, the maintenance crew fixed the armor on our tank while you were sleeping last night. I saw you were out cold, so I didn't wake you. I was surprised the welding didn't disturb you. Malyshenko frowned. Welding? They fixed the armor while I was asleep. What's going on?